Good morning, everyone. I thought I'd send another video message from the church on this Sunday. It's the fifth Sunday of Easter, and the gospel, if you perhaps read it or saw it watching Mass today on television or on the internet, you know that it's the gospel, that famous gospel of the story when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. It's a super long gospel. And there's a lot in there. But let me just share with you a couple things that occurred to me as I was reflecting upon it this morning. You know, there's a scene where Martha approaches Jesus. So after Jesus had been informed of Lazarus' pending death, he and his apostles and other disciples, they make their way to Bethany, which is where Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they were brother and sisters, lived. And Lazarus dies before they get there. And so Martha runs out and meets Jesus, and this line that comes out of her, this anguish that comes out of her mouth, she just says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Where were you when we needed you?" It goes on to have a meaningful conversation, and there's a lot to unpack there too. But remember, Martha was one who did not hold her tongue when she was talking to Jesus. There's another scene that had happened earlier when they were all together. Remember the scene where Martha is complaining to Jesus because she's doing all the work, and her sister Mary is there just sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to him, taking it in. So Martha doesn't mind speaking her mind to Jesus. "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." Interestingly, a little bit later in the gospel, there's another scene when Mary herself comes to Jesus and says those same words. "If you had been here, he wouldn't have died." Now, of course, we know how the story ends, but they didn't. And really, it reflects a similar message that we heard from Pope Francis. So the other day when Pope Francis had that message, Urbi et Orbi, to the city and to the world, that solitary figure speaking to us from an abandoned St. Peter's Square. Very powerful. If you didn't see it, go online. You can. It's an hour, maybe too long to watch the whole thing, but some very powerful moments in that. But also some very powerful moments in his little homily that he offered. And you can find that online too, just even in written form. He meditated some on the scene, another gospel scene where the disciples, the apostles are with Jesus in a boat and they're on the sea, and it's the story of the calming of the storm. And what Pope Francis pointed out was the fear that the apostles had, and almost anger, really. As they were being tossed about at sea, Jesus was asleep in the boat. In fact, Pope Francis points out that it's the only scene in the Gospels where Jesus is asleep. So Jesus is asleep in the boat. They wake him up and they say, "Lord, don't you care that we're going to perish? Don't you care?" You know, I think that's a sentiment that people sometimes feel when their life has been turned upside down, when they're calling out to God for help, when they're sick, when they're dying, when they lose a job, when a relationship goes south. And certainly in the situation that we find ourselves in now, when there's so much uncertainty, perhaps that's a prayer, those words of Martha and Mary. "If you'd been here, like, where are you when we need you?" And those words of the apostles, "Don't you care?" Of course we know he does. But until the situations are resolved, something in us, I suppose, wonders. We know that he raised Lazarus from the dead, and I actually did a written reflection on that. You can take a look at my written kind of homily that I attached to the email newsletter that went out the other day. But this morning I just wanted to reflect a little bit more on the passage, offer you some words of greeting, some video words of greeting. We may try to find some ways to do a little bit more of this because maybe this is going to be a while longer, or maybe not, but it's still maybe nice to see some familiar faces. I wish I could see yours. I hope these days have been productive for you in terms of, I'd written last week about trying to take advantage of this time to pray more, to grow in your relationship with God. I said, if we come out of this experience not stronger Christians, not better people than we were when we entered it, then we will have missed a golden opportunity. However, I've got to tell you that this week has been hard for me. I thought this was going to be like a retreat week. Now, I've been busy. I've had things I've had to do around the parish. There's some diocesan things, too, I've been involved in. But I noticed that when I sit down to try to pray or to try to read, I'm agitated internally. So I feel like my mind's going 100 miles a minute. And I think also back upon that scene of the apostles in that boat where the sea it's a turbulent and stormy sea, and it's hard to focus when our lives are turbulent. And so while I really think we got to focus on trying to focus and taking advantage of this time, I want to let you know that you are not alone if you're having a hard time. It just means maybe keep trying, try harder. I'm not sure. In any case, I want you to know I'm thinking about you today on this Sunday, and continue to pray for you, pray for me, pray for all of us, pray for the world, pray for the sick. No shortage of people and issues to pray for. God bless you and God keep you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do for you, even if it's just to talk. We're continuing trying to make phone calls, myself and other staff members. But if you'd like a conversation and I haven't gotten to you yet, feel free to send me an email or call the parish center. You can leave a message on my voicemail, but I'll check those messages and I'll call you back.